What happens when a Japanese pop idol reinvents herself as an actress? What happens when those around her have mixed feelings about this, as do her fans? How does she feel about this? How does her stalker feel? How about her former pop idol identity? How does she feel? What happens in this animated world? Tonight, an episode request by Cornelius Burroughs. Tonight, Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue.
I think when you're looking at a film, when you love movies and you love cinema as a whole, the artistic possibilities of cinema become clouded in what they can do, what they should do, and your ideas of what they should and shouldn't do. That's my little Donald Rumsfeld known
Yeah,
unknown moment. It has
it
to go.
is.
It has to be that confusing because it's my feelings for this movie are really confused and problematic, and it's been a while since I've been disturbed by what I was watching.
That's good.
It's very good. I'm very happy that I watched this movie. I can't say that I enjoyed the experience, but I value the movie watching experience because it was a challenge. On one hand, I'm looking at a film that for all intents purposes I imagine not should have, but in my mind should have been live action. That would have made it more palpable for some reasons. For some reason, that would make it more palpable. And I think we're going to get into this discussion psychologically. And I think I have the right partner to do this with. The fact that this is animated, and
Hmm.
I'm not sure if this is a cultural thing
Okay.
or,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think I'm not with you. Like, I don't feel the same. I'm cutting you off, but
hmm
I'm just telling you, like, put your foot on the gas, keep going, because I'm in the car with you. I'm not
hmm
like, I don't feel the same way that I think you're gonna say you're gonna feel, but I'm excited about what you're gonna say. I'm interested.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that I think being an American moviegoer and a movie watcher and inundated with these genres in the way that we are, I've always felt that animation was limited in the way it was produced and distributed in the United States.
Hmm.
There were so many possibilities to take on grander and bigger stories, and you would see what was coming out of Japan with anime, specifically Miyazaki. And Miyazaki would
Hmm.
go into these fantasies that were much different, much darker, and much more beautiful than the traditional Disney films that we were raised on here. And then you would see these animes that were based on mangas and these stories that are very popular, both here and in Japan, especially in Japan. Without for obvious reasons. And you would see these things be adapted, and you would see films that take on a more violent, profane, and in some ways pornographic look at the world. And that's when you're suddenly hit with these prurient ideas that are within you that are illogical, however, are difficult to get away from. It's almost like saying, when I tell somebody that I'm an atheist, And later on, I mentioned that I'm Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And someone will say, well, how do you... I thought you said you were an atheist. And I said, I am an atheist. I'm a Catholic atheist. Because in my view, Catholicism was the path that took me to atheism. And what I'm
Yeah.
seeing here is...
And you also probably feel bad about your atheism.
To a degree, yeah. To a little bit of a degree, yeah.
That's the Catholic part.
Well, yeah, the guilt. And I didn't realize the power of the foundational viewing until I saw this film. Because
the foundational viewing
of what you imagine a genre is. And in this instance, animation for me is either Disney or Warner Brothers.
Right.
And between the two shall never, pass. I mean, it's just
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you have the wild, anarchic slapstick of Warner Brothers, and you have the sweet goodness of Disney. This is something entirely different. And one scene in particular is what made it difficult for me. And I think you can imagine, based on conversations that we've had in the past.
I can, yeah.
Yeah, the scene that fucked me up a little bit. And it wasn't simply that there's a rape scene, which I have always, had problems with viewing in movies. I mean, they're there. You watch them, and it's what it is. This is not irreversible. This is not exploitation like Death Wish 2. What this is something completely different. Because I was unprepared, and I was fucking.
I mean, that's kind of
disturbed. I was disturbed. Yeah,
par for the course with a rape scene.
Yeah. Well, you're watching it, but there's something about it being animated, and these ideas of these memories of Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. All of this shit comes ratcheting back at you.
Right.
And there's something...
all the fucking Snow White pornography that you watched.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Online.
All of this shit...
You almost said exactly.
All of this shit becomes disturbing in a more, I think, profound way. I think it's a little bit more like, it's like, ooh, what the fuck? And from what I know about Japanese anime, this isn't even close to being the most disturbing thing that they produce. As I understand it, there are rape scenes with sea monsters, like octopus and shit, tentacle porn.
Monsters and,
there's shit like that. And
I mean, there's fucking live action tentacle porn.
It's a segment of the.
This shit exists,
Yeah, apparently there's some really weird, fucked up shit, in these movies. And I don't know how to, until you're faced with it, I don't know what the reaction is going to be. So when I was watching this last night, I was disturbed, and it was uncomfortable. The general story, I think, is an interesting one, and there were moments in there where it was playing with the dreamlike quality of what it was that reminded me of Mulholland Drive in some respects.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get into all that, obviously, but I want to stick to the good stuff. It's that's what I felt like you were. I wasn't expecting why you before we started recording, you said you had problems with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, I wasn't sure where you were going to go with this, but now that you started to talk about it, I'm like, the animation, we have a kind of like a culturally preconceived idea of what animation means. and what in the same way that like for the longest time, if you said like comics, not comic stand-up comic like you, but like comics,
Comic
it's like
strips.
okay, the funny papers,
Yeah.
comic strips, comic books, okay, Superman, and then they at a certain point they start to get a little bit darker. Alan Moore, all this other shit, and then if you get into graphic novels, and it's like, well, this is a comic book, and then someone's gonna say, well, no, that's a graphic novel. And it's like, well, it's a long comic book. No, it's a graphic novel because it has a different form. It does this and that. And then other people are like, well, that's not a long comic book. That's not a graphic novel. That's a movie that we're going to fucking make. And then Alan Moore's like, fuck you. That's a graphic novel.
Yeah.
So this is a film that is saying a film doesn't have to be live action. Anime doesn't have to be, or animation doesn't have to be for children. Animation doesn't have to make you laugh. Animation doesn't have to do this. Animation can do all the things that live action does. But it's from the mind of artists and writers and voice actors rather than like actors, actors who are showing their face, and using their body and their voice.
Yeah, the physical. Yeah.
The physical, and you know, this is different also because like, okay, you get sexuality in animation, and you get Jessica Rabbit, but that is commenting on itself. It's winking at you, and it's playing she's just drawn that way, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to see more, you actually have to go into the realm of pornography to look at that. Leslie and I were talking about that the other day about that scene.
She watched it with you. Okay.
No, she didn't watch it with me, but we were talking about it.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly how it came up. But we were talking about it, and I think we had seen a clip. This is now we're veering off to the side, but whatever. This is what we do. This is especially me. There was some clip about, it was some kind of like woke dude on Instagram who he talks to callers and people who have issues with like trans rights and all this other stuff, and by his rhetorical mastery and just his logic, he just kind of like challenges what they think are their ideas. And at some point we were watching a clip, and this dude who calls in to this person was saying about dating a 16-year-old or being attracted to a 16-year-old. So it became this thing. So then Leslie and I ended up like on a different day, the topic of conversation came up, and we're just talking about like, from a male perspective, my male perspective it's that if I see the shape of someone who's already sexually developed from across the street, and I don't know anything about them, but I just see the shape, my eye is going to be drawn to it. And then if I get like, then it's like, oh, if you learn, oh, that person is 16 years old, then obviously it's like, okay, blah, 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 like all this extra stuff that's like, okay, that's weird, that's off limits, that's blah, blah. Just the shape is just the shape. Then we were talking about how you get closer to that person. Let's say the person is still 16. You get closer, and then you see the face, and the face, I was like, obviously, I think most guys, if the face looks like too young, and it's like, no, this is weird. Yeah. Like, it's like, no, this is a kid, you know? Even if the person is like 20, 21, 22, and then if she looks too young, it's going to weird you out. Maybe if she looks too young, but you know she's old enough, it's legal, maybe that's going to turn some people on. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, it's fantasy. Um, and that's all, fantasy versus reality, legality, ethics, morality, all that shit. The reason why I brought it up into connecting it to this film is because I said, well, there's a rape scene in this film. And I said, and the way that the rape scene at certain points is drawn, because the rape scene takes place within the context of a TV show, like a story within the story, a frame. And so the rape scene is made for viewers. I mean, every rape scene in every film is made for a viewer, but it's made for viewers in a different way than Death Wish. Death Wish is made for a viewer, so the viewer will feel outrage. I feel like this rape scene was made for a viewer in the same way that Casualties of War, when we talked about this, when we talked about Vietnam over the course of 4 or 5 episodes years ago. In Casualties of War, soldiers go into Vietnamese, into a village, and they go into one house or hut, whatever it is, and there are two women, and you know what's going to happen. They're going to take one of them, and the camera shows 2 women, and one of them seems slightly prettier than the other one, from what I remember.
Yeah, that was the line.
And it's like you're being put in that place where now you, against your will, just because you're in that situation as the viewer, because you're being manipulated by the director, that you are now, whether you choose or not, you have to ask yourself, which will they choose? But it's from your perspective, your eyes. And for 9 out of 10 times, they're going to pick the so-called prettier one. This film, the way that this scene is shot, the way it's drawn, the movements, the motions, some of those same clips, angles, could be used in a sex scene.
Yeah.
Not a rape scene. The sounds. So it puts you in a more disturbed position because there's a part of you that could be watching the scene, and there's part of you visually, for certain angles, certain clips, like I said, that is turned on by that. In a deep reptilian place. Separate, obviously, from the rape aspect, which that part is kicking in and going like, what the fuck? And so you have this like weird, or there's the potential for this weird conflict that makes it even more disturbing. Because it's like, what the fuck am I watching? And what the fuck, how do I feel about this? Because I know how I'm supposed to feel, and I know how I feel, but why also, like, if I look at these things in isolation, it's like, oh, that's weird. I was looking at her breasts bounce. So, look, I mean, I get this thing that you're talking about. I didn't come into it with a sense of I'd seen this film once before, and someone had recommended it to me. They had recommended another one called Paprika, which I've seen.
I've heard of that one. I've heard very good things about that one, but I don't know.
Yeah, mostly in relation to other films, which we can get into, and we'll go there. But still, it's one of those that I'm just like watching this, and that's where it gets into. It has an interesting. It's so all over the place, this film, and it has these references and it's within the thriller genre,
Mhm.
but it's crazy because it's animated, but it really has this kind of like lineage. It has this genealogy.
Yeah.
First of all, it has references to other 90s thriller. There's a reference to a Buffalo Bill type character within the show that's in the film,
Mhm.
the film within the film, where the character mentioned he kills women to become a woman. So that's Silence of the Lambs. That's a reference
Yeah.
from earlier the same. This film is 97. There's the elevator killing in this film,
That's
which is
Dress to Kill.
Basic Instinct. Dress to Kill,
Dress to
Basic
Kill isn't
Instinct
Basic
too.
Instinct. Yeah. I forgot about
Yeah.
Basic Instinct. Yeah.
I forgot about Dress to Kill. There's
We
Killing
cover
with
the
Ice
bases.
Pick. Yeah, we cover. You know, well, it all gets. It also all goes back to fucking
Hitchcock.
to Hitchcock,
Yeah.
because it's so killing with an ice pick, Basic Instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Stalker / psycho alter ego, Basic Instinct.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in general, like, which also is like a subgenre of fucking Hitchcock, is the erotic thriller. It's like a mix between fucking noir and Hitchcock, erotic thriller. Not this, but I mean that genre.
Yeah.
Color of Night with Bruce Willis, this probably straight to video film from the mid 90s, that deals with like murder, because all these films deal with jealousy, murder, sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
Rape or sex scenes that border on that, or that they're so animalistic and so violent because the animalistic is brought out because of this passion and all this and that. It's Lynchian, like you described. There's Mulholland Drive. There's other Lynch stuff that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't seen, that I don't want to name drop because I don't want to give away shit.
Mm-hmm.
But it is Lynchian. Aspects of Roman Polanski, which already brings up, all of that baggage.
Yeah.
Is like you can't
separate that. Yeah.
Repulsion. You have, like you said, Vertigo. Who is this? Is this that? Who is this woman? This idea of like stalking, this idea of following, this idea of like image, and then you get into like, where do you go from that? Obviously De Palma, but then like, how did this affect Darren Aronofsky? Like, you've seen
Requiem.
You've seen Requiem.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you've also seen Black Swan.
Yes.
So you said Requiem. So what about Requiem?
There was a scene in I don't remember what Jennifer. What's her name? Jennifer Connelly. How could I forget her? There was a scene where Jennifer Connelly has I don't remember exactly what, but she's the bathtub, the shower,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess Aronofsky pulled that from the shot here, the above watching Meek. What was Mima?
Mima. Have you seen it?
What, Requiem?
Have you seen that shot? Like, no, I know you've seen Requiem, but did when you saw this, did you say that looks familiar? Did you say that's Requiem? Did you did you read about
I knew
it?
that
Hear about it?
No, it struck me as something that I had seen before, but I wasn't. It was the angle. It was the above shot, and I was like, well, where have I seen that from? Yeah, where you see her in the water, and then it's above, and I love the shot, and then it goes underneath the water, and you see her screaming underwater, and that's when I went online to see. Well, that's one of the great things about online now is that you can. If there's some kind of memory that is triggered, you can kind of Columbo that shit and figure out where it comes from. and
Yeah.
that's where it told me that it was a shot in Requiem, that Aronofsky had pulled it from there because Aronofsky was greatly influenced by this film for both Requiem and Black Swan, and you can see a lot of the Natalie Portman character in Mima. Um, the transformation from Natalie Portman into the Mila Kunis character, and that's a movie that I haven't seen in a long time. So again, the memory is patchwork. So it's kind of fun when you do it this way because your memory fills in gaps, and sometimes it fills it in incorrectly. So I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly what I saw in Requiem, but I know that it triggered a memory, and it's because the image is so powerful. The image it's a powerful image that really sticks in your head and says, "This is a little bit of more importance. This is Travis Bickle driving through New York. This is the slow pan from Bickle on the phone into the hallway. This is
Hmm.
certain shots that you've seen in any number of films. Omar Sharif coming out of the desert in Lawrence of Arabia. This is
Lawrence.
shit that really it plants itself in your it plants itself in your head, and then it starts growing from there. You might not remember the entire film, but you will remember those images, and you'll remember how you saw them and what you were thinking then, and it kind of takes you back, and sometimes it fucks with your memory, but it is memorable. So
Yeah. I mean, there there's that bathtub shot.
hmm
I mean, those shots, that sequence is basically just taken from this film. Um, there's a moment where Mima's alter ego jumps off. She jumps off of the stage.
hmm
Um, that's very reminiscent of the end of Black Swan. There's a moment like that. There are moments when in the fight between Mima and her alter ego that are reminiscent of the fight between the Black Swan and the White Swan. Um, there are the themes that Aronofsky loves to work with: depersonalization, self-destruction, alter ego. The the rape scene on that stage has things in common with, the men around it, watching her. There
yeah,
are echoes of Requiem and
the
Jennifer
ending,
Connelly, and
yeah.
we talked about this years ago, and
hmm
you were making me doubt myself because we were at your apartment and we were recording, and I'm like, there's a double-sided dildo scene.
hmm
And you're like, really? And I was like, yeah. And then you're like, but is that what it is? And I'm like, yeah, isn't it? Like, um, and then yeah, it's this crazy scene that it's one of those that it's kind of like it's fucked up, but you're also being put in the position of these men that are around there
yeah,
watching, that are around there paying for this, but you're also being put in her position, and you're also in your position as the audience member at home or wherever, or in the film in the movie theater or wherever the fuck you are, and in the position of, are you a fucking, what do you do in life? What is your position? What are your politics? What are your fucking, what's your ideology? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about, you know what I mean? Like,
hmm
so you're being forced to see things that not only like do you not want to see, but you bought this ticket, um, and now you have to go for the fucking ride,
yeah,
and sometimes you're gonna fucking on some kind of reptilian level. I mean, your eyes are gonna fucking dilate because it's like whether it's out of fear or out of fucking lust, like that's that thin line. You know what I mean? And the directors, the Peckinpahs, and the De Palmas, and any number of directors know and horror, the horror genre and the thriller genre, and it's like to mix violence and sexuality, to mix threat, danger.
Hmm.
Um, there's something about that that fucking like gets us keyed in and gets us confused and gets us aroused and gets us repulsed and all of these things, thrown in the blender of cinema. Um, so it's interesting then that like so much of this story is about the idea of this voyeuristic fucking world that we live in. And that makes me like it to talk about like, is it not better, but what would it have been had it been live action? I think that had this been live action, it just would have. I think it would have been a good film, but I think that what sets it apart is that it's drawn, that
And
it's
that's
not.
exactly what I'm talking about, where it is more disturbing because, and this is why the cultural thing matters to me. That's why I bring it up. It's not to say that the Japanese are more depraved than us. It's to say that conditioning brings with it a certain acceptance with what you are watching. This is a very foreign. I think if your average person, your average movie watcher, I'm not talking about the cinephiles. I'm not talking to people about the people that really embrace foreign cinema and different types of cinema. I'm talking about the average person who goes to an AMC or to a Pacific or whatever, a Krikorian, whatever, those people who look at movies as an escape or as just a simple good time. Those people who love that fucking Nicole Kidman prelude at AMC. These are the people that I'm talking about. I think they would have a very difficult time watching something like this and being accepting of it. So I wonder if the conditioning of movie watching in Japan and in Asia, for that matter, allows for something like this to be taken as simply storytelling. This is not simply storytelling for me. It doesn't exist that way. It can't exist that way in my head. It's not to take away from the movie. It's not to say that the movie is not a good film. It is a very good film, but it's problematic for the baggage that I bring to it. My 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 absorption, my visual absorption of certain types of genre, or not genre, but styles of filmmaking. In this case, animation. I was thinking about this because we've had a few instances of adult-oriented, adult-themed animation. I'm thinking specifically of Ralph Bakshi in the 1970s and early and mid 80s with Fritz the Cat, Coonskin, Cool World, shit like that. The difference is with his films, they were comical, and the introduction of comedy into it makes it a little bit more palpable. There's nothing funny in this film. There are no moments where there is no levity. There is no moment where the valve is opened up and the pressure is released. This is when you say it would have been a different film. It would have been I'm assuming that the way I read it is a live action version of this film would have been less disturbing.
And
I
another
don't think you're
another
saying, yeah. Just go ahead. I'm sorry.
another thriller. It would have
Yeah.
been another
It would
one
have
of
been par for
those,
the course. It would have been
yeah,
something that we've seen in the past, and we've seen either done worse or better or on the same level. The
right,
fact that
right.
this is animated, it turns a switch in you. If you're of this mentality, I would love to hear a native Japanese impression of this film. I would love to see, not a Japanese American, not someone raised on American cinema. I'm talking about somebody from that part of the
From
world
there.
and how they, yeah, because I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating the psychological effects and interpretation of art, how you do that, how you interpret things. And I guess I was
Yeah,
aware of it, but I wasn't face to face with it until this film. I'd never had reason to think about it.
which is cool.
Yeah.
Anytime that you can say face to face with anything in terms of cinema, that's already a great contribution to life, to someone's life, to be put. You know what I mean? Like it's in this kind of like voyeuristic world that we live in today,
Yeah.
to still be able to watch things that fuck with us on that level. Because just like we were talking about things, on this episode of things that fuck with us. The idea of like Instagram having fucking
Oh yeah.
having posts of women breastfeeding, but they're not breastfeeding. They're just getting around censorship
Well,
by having
describe
baby
it.
dolls.
Yes.
It's a woman breastfeeding, but she's not breastfeeding because it's a baby doll. It's not a real baby.
Mm-hmm.
So this woman is like using the idea of like, okay, on certain platforms, if it falls under health and wellness or whatever, there are different expectations in the same way that like, in National Geographic, there would be pictures of women's breasts because it would be like within a tribal, cultural, tribal environment.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, that was not nakedness, that was nudity. And the distinction is, as I'm making it and others have made it before, is that like, it's not erotic, it's just the human body. In the same way that Michelangelo's David is not erotic, it's just, it's anatomy, it's the human body, even though that's obviously like idealized in terms of like his musculature and all that. Like he doesn't have a dad bod. David like looks like he works out, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he does.
so these clips or these reels or whatever of these women, it's not about breastfeeding. It's about being able to show the nipple and to trick the platform by introducing now a baby, but the baby isn't real. So that now this sexual thing, which is, this is now, because if you have something that's partially covered, it's erotic. If you have something that's fully exposed, it's either like straight up like sexual, or else it's just anatomical, right? The eroticism is in the, like, is the nipple going to slip out or is it not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh
like,
yeah, the eroticism is in the restriction.
To find out.
Yeah.
The eroticism is in the restriction.
Yeah.
And so getting back to this, that's still something that you can see, that you can scroll upon that on Instagram and go, what the fuck am I watching? Because you understand that they're mixing two things that for the average person should not be together. Like sexuality and an infant is disturbing. Then you're like, that's a fake baby. Then you're like, this is a fucking ploy.
Yeah.
This is, and you start breaking it down, but you've already had all these internal reactions because you're already freaking out, or you're being like, censorship is going off in your mind, or some people are probably fucking like, how can I fucking crop out the baby,
But there's so much to it where it's like, I mean, in the world of pornography and pornographic imagery, it's all about getting around whatever is taboo and whatever is disturbing. And if you look at
pressing the button.
yeah, well, if you look at Pornhub right now, you want to talk about pressing buttons. The biggest, what is the biggest? From what I've heard, the biggest search is MILF, and it's stepmother sex or stepfather with stepdaughter. Taboo. It's really weird, disturbing shit. And I mean, you watch this, and I don't. You're watching a woman say. You're watching one of these stars talk about, oh, your stepmother this and your stepmother that, and she loves her and it's just fucking weird and strange and disturbing. But it's the biggest
But yeah,
thing
I mean,
out there. It's the fucking. It's
well,
turning that
yeah,
revenue wheel, you know. And I think
but
there's
it's
an.
turning the revenue wheel on. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were saying.
It's turning the revenue wheel on it's the taboo, it's the fantasy, it's the what lies beneath
Mm-hmm.
from the place where our fantasies and our anxieties like bubble, they stew there down below, and they have to be addressed somehow, because if not, they emerge. I mean, I've read about, yeah, like the top ones are MILF, the top ones are in Republican states, the top ones are
Yeah.
in the states
Interracial?
that were no. Well, I
No.
mean, that's probably that would be an interesting one to look up. Um, that would be an interesting, yeah, some kind of interracial like cuckold thing.
Mm-hmm.
But also trans
Oh yeah.
in all of these like where they're banning books, they're Googling trans porn. Um, where they're um, trying to suppress rights in the street, they're online like Googling. They're looking at all of it. Um, so it's all of these dichotomies, and so going back to this film, um, we're in this voyeuristic um, place, but still in 2024 we can be so jaded
Yeah.
and so numb to many things that you can, but the fact is that we can still stumble upon something that is going to like push our buttons in a way that does more than just push our buttons, because this is more than just that, because this is storytelling, and it is on the one hand connected to this anime tradition that we don't even know about. And I was telling someone at work yesterday, like because of this film, I mean, my relationship to anime is like Akira.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend growing up, still my friend, a brother to me, super into anime, like from the 80s, like RoboCop, I mean, no, Robotech,
Mm-hmm.
Macross, all this stuff. Akira, always at my birthday, he would bring it and we would watch it. And then, later on, other stuff. I was into Ion Flux on MTV.
I remember that.
Um, I was into that. Miyazaki, yeah. This is different, and now I want to become more literate in terms of anime, in terms of the history of anime,
Mm-hmm.
so I can place this, so I can see what does this like draw from, and what does it like I guess, in a modernist kind of sense, it's like, what does it rebel against? What is it answering?
Well,
What
see that.
questions raised is it now answering?
I think that's important. But like what you're describing right there, I think that's the process of growing in an understanding of a genre and a medium, because this is different than just cinema. This is animation, animated cinema. This is not genre. It's um uh what would you call it?
Yeah, it's another type of cinema.
I guess, like, there's narrative cinema, there's documentary cinema, there's animation, there's experimental, and then there's what would you call Anger? Keith Anger. That's not experimental. That's something.
Kenneth Anger is,
Yeah,
is art house cinema.
art house
It's
cinema.
it's it's surrealist. Yeah. It's art cinema.
It's even more than art cinema, though. I mean, it wouldn't.
I mean,
Well,
it's art cinema, but you could also say, okay, now we're getting into like it's surrealism,
yes. Yeah.
it's occultism,
Hmm.
it's esotericism. You know what I mean? Like it's symbolism.
Hmm.
Um, those are like tags, but I
Yeah.
mean, like this is another form of cinema,
Yeah.
and within anime, because you're mentioning all these things, and like this film is
Yeah.
proof that because now it's like, okay, how do you make a document? How do you make an animated documentary?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? And is it still a documentary?
Well, I mean, you could do what you would rotoscope. Basically, is what
That's
you
what I'm
would do.
saying.
You
Right,
could do that. It is possible to develop something like that and build from there.
right.
Yeah.
But does that go against? And obviously, this is all just rhetorical, and there
Hmm.
are answers to these questions exist in as cinema already. Probably that's 30 years old.
Yeah.
That we don't know about. Some we do know, some we don't. But like, is Waking Life, is that animation? Is that considered anime? I mean, it's not Japanese anime, but you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Um, because this also goes into like Philip K. Dick
Yeah.
territory, um, which is like the not Waking Life, but the other
Scanner Darkly, I think.
Scanner Darkly.
Yeah.
Yeah, um, gets into that. Um, so this thing is, on the one hand, it's anime, but on the other hand, it's thriller, but on the other hand, it's this. And in the world itself, what happens when you have this pop idol,
Hmm.
part of a trio, who decides, I'm going to reinvent myself. I want to be an actor, an actress. We have real world examples of what happens when people decide to make choices in their own lives. For whatever reason, they decided, hey, I got famous. Now I still want to have a life of my own. I still want to make choices. And some asshole out there is like, no, what the fuck are you doing? You're betraying my fucking twisted view of what you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
who you're supposed to be, for me. I mean, John Lennon, I don't know when it was that, it seems like fairly recently we were talking about stalkers, and I don't remember the context.
I remember them. Oh, it was
Maybe
Nightcrawler. It was
it might have been
Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nightcrawler. Yeah. And so, I mean, 1980, Mark David Chapman
Hmm.
shows up outside of the Dakota in the Upper West Side by Central Park. He's got Double Fantasy album. He's all about Catcher in the Rye and his hatred of, Holden Caulfield's hatred of phonies. Shows up, talks to Lennon, later on comes back, shoots him in the back, kills him. John Lennon. Not fucking, we're not talking about John Hinckley Jr. shooting Reagan for some like political whatever a year later. We're talking about, I mean, obviously John Lennon was political, but just these are different things, but they're also similar. John Hinckley Jr. also stalked Jodie Foster.
Hmm.
Jodie Foster connects to who? Travis Bickle.
Hmm.
Travis Bickle connects to who? Rupert Pupkin, King of Comedy. Rupert Pupkin connects to who? The Joker in the Joaquin Phoenix film.
Yeah.
The Joker connects to who? Me Mania from this film. You know what I mean? Because it's all fucking the degrees of cinematic separation. When we brought up Rebecca Schaefer, we brought up because that's a famous one. Shot right at her house in the 80s. We brought up going back to fucking De Niro connections. Teresa Saldana stabbed.
Survived.
She was survived.
Yeah.
She was I was like the commission's wife. She's also in Raging Bull.
Yeah.
She was in that show, The Commish. There was this stalker named Ricardo Lopez. I don't think I brought him up. I don't remember. He
No, this is
tried
the
to kill
first I'm
Bjorn.
hearing about it.
Well, this one connects to this. This reminds me of this film because in this film you have, for those of you who don't know, because we've been all over the places, we started talking about, we went from rape scene right off the top to um, baby dolls and fucking breastfeeding on Instagram, um, to the history of anime that we don't know,
Yeah.
to stalkers. So welcome to our world, you know. So in this film, the premise is pop star in Japan decides, I want to switch it up. I want to change directions. Her management, like one side is like, this is a great move. The other one's like, I don't know. I want to protect her. Like this doesn't seem like, I'm not sure, you know.
Yeah.
Her fan base, they have mixed feelings about it. She starts going through this process, and as she's going through the process, in the film, as a viewer, you start to lose, as does she, perspective on what's real and what isn't, because the show that she's in starts to mirror her life. You don't know if scenes that you're watching are from her life, or from, it's the editing. It's so fragmented that you don't know what's real. You don't know what's memory, what's imagined, what's part of the show that she's on, what's the stalkers, because she gets a stalker who basically creates a fan site from her perspective. So you don't know what's his hallucination. You don't know what's this shared psychosis that you end up having, because spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. By the end of the film, it's like one of her management, who herself had been a pop idol, now takes on this identity as the real Mima, the one that didn't betray her original role. So it's now this Basic Instinct thing where it's like, which one is will the real Catherine Trammell please straddle me and stab me to death, you know? Like that. So reality is blurred. It's, again, Lynchian. Life imitates art, the show, vice versa. There are moments that repeat where she's waking up in her room, but it's like, wait, didn't she go home with this other lady who's like protecting her? But like, is it a set? Is it a set that's created in that woman's apartment to mirror this chick's actual room? The fan site starts to become more real than her own experiences. And she starts to go back to read, like, what did I do today? I want to know what I actually did today versus the show versus whatever. So the fan site itself begins to ground her in some form of external reality. But that reality is literally an external view of her from her point of view. So it's the stalker fan site written as if it's her blog, but it's written by someone else. But then the next layer is that, well, it's written by someone else under the influence of, it's written by her stalker under the influence of her protector, who's actually like psychotically believing that she's actually the real her. If any of that makes sense. And if it doesn't, good, because that's where you're supposed to be. So now all of this shit, it's animated. And the fact that it's animated makes it all the more dreamlike.
Yeah.
It makes it all the more fantastical. But also that tension between the fantastical with the blood and guts of it, with the sexuality of it, the violence of it, the violation of it, the trust, all that stuff. So here we are, like, watching this film about people who watch stars, and then there's a stalker, and there's an alter ego, and there's the history of cinema, and there's the news, and there's all this other shit, and it's kind of like, you don't know what you don't know where she's at, but also it becomes there's a point where it's like you don't know where you're at. Like
Yeah.
you don't like where am I sitting? What chair do I even sit in? Because we like to think of ourselves as like, yeah, I know who I am. I know what I stand for. I know what I believe in. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. Um, and if you've seen enough movies, you get an idea as like, well, not only that, but I know what's gonna happen. I know movies. I know movies. And then something happens and you go, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that. It's this. Because as soon as that twist comes, you're like, okay, now it's a different fucking outcome. And I already know what that outcome is gonna be because I know all of the alternate routes of the choose your own adventure thing. But Colin is choosing the adventure for you. But then he tricks you again. Then he tricks you again. And that's kind of like the Nolan influence. I mean, well, no, his influence on Nolan.
Yeah, get it right.
Yeah, get it right. Yeah, which came first, the fucking the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah.
Especially if the chicken starts to dress like an egg, then it really fucks you up.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you talked a little bit about getting into the anime world and the history of anime, and this is a film that I would definitely recommend to people. But I would not say start with this film. This is the last film that I would say, because it could really turn you off to what the genre is and what it's capable of. I think you got to really ease yourself, especially coming from an American perspective and what we know. I would definitely start with the Miyazaki and work your way through the fantasy into something a little bit darker. Well, definitely darker, not just a little bit darker, like Grave of the Fireflies. Very powerful, very emotional and sad. And then slowly rid yourself of the preconceived notions of what animation is, something that I did not do going into this, something that I was not, I mean, admittedly, this is my fault. This is, my viewing of this film is stilted by my shortcomings as a movie watcher of this type of film. I was not prepared for this. I really wasn't prepared for what this film was.
What's interesting though is like hearing you describe it this way, and we've been doing this shit for almost 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
It's different from other times because I typically now at this point in going back to what outcomes we think that we've come to expect. Typically, what I expect is that if you're saying like, "Oh, this film was problematic for me," I expect you to say that that there was something wrong with the film, that the film was a failure according to you, because of XYZ reasons, right?
Yeah. And I stand by those reviews, though. I stand by that shit.
I mean, and
in those old ones,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, why would it?
Yeah.
That's your viewing of it. Like that's your experience of it. Like, otherwise, it's kind of like it's one thing to have an open mind, but it's another thing to like, well, if you don't have a position, if you can have any position, then you have no position at all.
Yeah.
So typically, okay, I couldn't like relate to the characters or whatever. Like you have expectations in terms of also that are tied to like what kind of film is it? How does the like what kind of plot? All that.
Yeah.
And you want to feel. I think you are typically like an emotional viewer. You want to fucking feel it. You want something visceral. But interestingly, this one, it's not that you are. That you think that the film itself is problematic. It's your relationship culturally to the material and how that made you feel.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because it's like to even describe like how to kind of like wade into the waters of this type of film, this type of anime. and how you would like build up, because it's like how does one do that? Like how do you get to it? Because what happens if you do fucking like just jump into this and it's like, whoa, like this is not, it could turn someone off, and it could be like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is fucked up, this is too heavy, this is too blah blah. But then what happens if they watch Spirited Away fucking tomorrow? You know what I mean? Like it we get into this trap of thinking that everything is like of sameness, because we get into genre and we get into form and all this
Yeah.
and that. But who knows? I mean, like this, it might be the opposite for me, because I might like, obviously I mentioned whatever films I've seen like some Miyazaki stuff, not a lot, but are, let's say, some Princess Mononoke knockoff,
Mm-hmm.
for example. If I go and try to watch that after watching this, like that is probably going to feel very empty to me. So there are a number of different reactions
Mm-hmm.
or responses that you can arrive at, because someone else might see this cold and be turned off. Someone might see this cold and be like, oh shit, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then now they want every fucking animated film to knock their fucking head off. And some things are meant to melt their heart, so to speak. You know what I mean? Versus like fucking, so it is interesting.
Well,
And then,
it's fascinating because films are able to do things to you that you don't know until you see it in front of you, until you're experiencing it. I never knew that I could watch an animated film, a cartoon, basically, and be told the story of two people's love in a 5-minute prologue that ends with a miscarriage and the death of one of the couple. That's one of the most. I remember watching Up and crying in the first
yeah,
10 minutes of the movie,
yeah,
and
they hit
it
you
was
hard.
and it was a movie that when I heard of the premise, I thought Pixar has finally fucked up. This is not going to work. This is moronic. And it was my favorite. It was until Wall-E. It became my favorite film of what the studio had produced. With this, I like the fact that it took me to a place that was both uncomfortable and intellectually challenging, because I wasn't. I don't know what the fuck I was expecting. I had never heard of this film. I didn't know what the film was about. I went into it cold. I didn't watch the trailer for it. I just sat down and began watching it, and it had that cutesy little girl band pop idol thing, which is I'm not a fan of. It's not my thing. And then it started getting really dark, where I found myself being uncomfortable with. But I liked the discomfort. I liked the challenge. I liked finding myself in really unfamiliar, murky waters that could either be incredibly rewarding, or I could have walked away pissed off. I wasn't pissed off. I didn't feel like I had seen the greatest film of all time, but I did feel like I saw something that that was unlike. Well, I can't even say that, because I've seen this film. I've seen this film many times. I've just never seen it like this. And
Yeah, it's
the trans,
similar enough and different enough.
exactly, yeah. To see it in a medium that I traditionally associate, subconsciously associated only with children's films, made it very disturbing. I can't get around that reading of it. It's a bad reading of it, and it's problematic, and it's in some ways very restrictive.
Of course, yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah,
this is for grown-ups. This is for fucking children. Like,
hmm
yeah, that's. But
How do you get away from years, 49 years of conditioning?
I mean, either something like fucking hits you so hard that the world becomes Technicolor after that.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a twister or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or you work on eroding that wall, so that it's like, obviously now, not that you didn't know it intellectually before, your mind knows, like, yes, I get that it's not clear cut, as it's not as clear cut as animation equals childish, or for
Mm-hmm.
children live action equals for adults, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
But you still have some kind of thing emotionally or somewhere in your like beliefs. That's just something that has to be continually like loosened up by viewings of things that are similar to this, so that it's so that the belief itself changes. And even then, there might be some kind of residual ghost of fucking like that idea, just because because it's so deeply conditioned.
Yeah.
It's I mean, the second half of this film is the one that like I keep playing,
Mm-hmm.
from the elevator scene,
Yeah.
because the murder scenes are just super interesting to me.
Yeah.
And well, even like, I think I'd start. I don't even know if I finished talking about that, but that dude Ricardo Lopez, he tried to kill Bjork. He was obsessed with Bjork,
Mm-hmm.
and he sent her a letter, like a bomb, a letter bomb, in the same fashion as in this film. The stalker Mimania sends her a bomb. He ended up going home, this killer, or this would-be killer, this stalker, and he records himself committing suicide. So it's already like this voyeuristic thing. And so now you have this voyeuristic kind of stalker, but then now takes the stage for his own suicide on video. It's fascinating.
I would agree.
So yeah, this is for me, this is exciting, because you know that there are these paths, but sometimes you need that catalyst, or you need that. And I had seen this. I've seen Paprika. And there's so many things that are like on the back burner for this show.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who are like, hey, like, I recommended a movie before, and like, you're not like responding. Do I need to dress like you and remake the show? They don't say that. But it's like what we're doing now is, every time someone donates to buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos, watch this. WatchRickRamos? What is it?
Watch Rick Ramos.
I've said it so many times that I forgot it.
Yeah.
So every time someone donates, whether it's $1 million or $5, we mention their name in an episode.
Yeah.
Because thank you. Every few months, what we're going to do is, those of you listeners who have donated the most, and or the most often or most consistently, because we want to acknowledge both, we hit you up and say, hey, like, not only like have you donated, thank you for that, but you've donated the most or the most consistently, the most often. Um, Let us know what you want us to watch and talk about. Make a request. And so this was one of those. Burroughs goes way the fuck back.
Longtime supporter. He even sent me this film, I think 10 years ago. 6 or 7 years ago, however long. Yeah.
This is a long time coming, this fucking process. And so here we are, we're talking about it. And now it's going to change. It's not going to change the course of the show, but it's going to alter the trajectory of the show a little bit in terms of like the immediate future, because this spins off to other shit, and then we'll spin off to something else, and then someone else is going to recommend something else, and it's that way. It's a form of a dialogue that gets opened up, because now we're talking about not only something that someone wants to hear us talk about, but now it's like by introducing the film, whether we know it or not, whether we were aware of the film or seen the film, you're now introducing other aspects of cinema. You're introducing other thematics and now Burroughs is not only introducing this film to us. You hadn't seen it, I had seen it once, but now Burroughs is introducing this film to other people who listen to this show. So now maybe there's somebody in Japan who's like, oh yeah? What about this? And gives us $1 billion. And then we're like, okay, what do you got? What do you want us to talk about? And he's like, okay, now this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like it blows this one away, just something else. Or gives us $5. Burroughs gives consistently. It doesn't matter how much. He listens. Some of you don't give at all, but you listen. You're giving us that. So the dialogue is between Rick and me, but also the dialogue is between the listener, the film, the viewer, the podcaster, the film geek, the cinephile, all of it. Perfect Blue, not a perfect film, because I mean, what is a perfect film? But for what it is, I think it's a perfect film. It's perfectly itself. It's like we said, different enough, but similar enough, so that it fits in this lineage. But it's like, I still get hints of Hitchcock. I still get notes of Lynch. I still get a little bit of Basic Instinct, not in such a campy way as Basic Instinct. I get De Palma. I get all of these things, but now it's in an anime bottle. Where do I place this? This is going to be one that now I'm going to incorporate into more viewings, like personal, and especially the second half of the film, which is really where it like spins around and around and around. So I'm excited about talking about more of his films. I'm excited about talking about anime. I'm excited about talking about influences that he's had on other people. So this was a fun one.
This is a good time. I'm disturbed. I'm not the same man that I was 2 days ago, but it was a hell of a learning experience. And sometimes you got to find out things about yourself that you didn't know. Movies help us do that. So thank you, Mr. Burroughs. I'm sorry that it took as long as it did for me to sit down and appreciate your gift. And to the rest of you, thank you so much. We'll be back again next week. All right, bye-bye.